Welcome to the Get in the Fight podcast. My name is Nate Whitson, and I'm the founder of Get in the Fight Ministries and our exclusive online fight club for Christian men. Everything we do here is dedicated to helping Christian men become the men that God meant for them to be. So if you're looking for helpful content and conversations that can help you to grow and become the man that God made you to be, then you're in the right place. But before we get started, please do me a huge favor and be sure to subscribe, click the like button, and then leave us a 5-star review. Doing that helps us to reach more men who are looking for content just like this. Also, if you'd like to learn more about our mission and how to get involved or how to join the Fight Club, then head on over to getinthefight.club. That's getinthefight.club and learn more today. But without further ado, it's time to get in the fight. So let's go. Hey everybody, welcome to the Get in the Fight podcast. I'm your host, Nate Whitson. And this podcast is really intended for Christian men. We are here to help Christian men live bigger, better lives, become the men that God meant for us to be. We say this a lot, but we think God has made you with great purpose and intentionality. You're here in this time and space for a reason. And what we find is that a lot of men, myself included, sometimes find that we have stopped fighting for that life. We kind of are coasting. We're apathetic. We're just existing, and yet there's something that stirs deep inside of us that wants more. And so we are just challenging men with things like, if you have secret sins in your life, if you're living apathetic, and if you are struggling in your marriage or in parenting, if you're a man whose mindset is weak and you're just going like, I just want to find strength in these areas. I want to get better than this. I want to live bigger than this. We talk about topics like that all the time. And in fact, if this is the first time you're listening to the Get in the Fight podcast, I'm really excited for you. I'm super excited for today's guest, Ted Shimer. We're going to talk about what I think and what Josh McDowell in the front of his book thinks is the number one problem facing the church today. We're going to talk about pornography. And I think more importantly, we're going to talk about freedom. We're going to be talking about the context, I think Ted says in his book here, about the context of discipleship and becoming the men that God meant for you to be and living in freedom of this. So I'm super excited about that. I think it's super important. Excited to have Ted here. Ted is a graduate from Dallas Theological Seminary. He was trained as a pastoral sex addiction professional supervisor, and he helps people overcome the bondage of pornography in the context of making disciples. I love that line. He's the founder of The Freedom Fight, which is an online porn addiction recovery program. And he and his wife have 4 adult kids. They hail from the great state of Arkansas. Ted, thanks for jumping on. I'm so grateful to have you.
Nate, it's great to be here, man. I've been looking forward to it.
Me too. And I just want to show everybody that's watching on the YouTube channel, this is what the book looks like. The Freedom Fight, the new drug, and the truth that sets us free. I just want to say this at the outset, like, go buy the book. We're going to get into these conversations here, and I'm just telling you, the book has been unbelievable. The website, The Freedom Fight, is it
.com or .org, both?
Oh, they are both there. Okay, good idea. Smart. Yeah, so go to thefreedomfight.com and check that out and get connected there. I just want to say that at the outset, because there's so much here. The book has been unbelievable. And in fact, I want to read one quote before I bring you in, Ted, to share and start asking questions of you. This quote, there's so many, by the way, that I thought, like, man, like, I could just read the book to people. maybe I'll do that outside of you being here. But this really, I think, captured the heart, I think, of where we struggle. And I just want to read this here. In Ted's book, he says, a church planting missionary who worked overseas shared how his own discouragement over his pornography use was a major reason he doubted his faith and came home. He said this, I don't see any victory in the area of porn. I mean, is my faith real? I'm reading the Bible and it says, how shall we sin anymore if Christ is in us? Meanwhile, I cannot shake this thing and I have no idea what in the world to do about it. I'm like, that kind of gave me chills, to be honest, because I think I've lived that. I've felt that. And men that I talk to, that they live that, like the shame, the hurt, how can I be a Christian and deal with this? Like, what is wrong with me is so profound and so strong. And again, I said this at the beginning, Josh McDowell gives a little blurb at the top of the book that says, I think it's the number one issue facing the church. And so I want to take that quote and kind of use it as a lead in, Ted, to kind of say like what led you to this point. How did you start the freedom fight and this recovery program?
Well, when my wife and I went into full-time ministry after we graduated college, we went on staff with a discipleship collegiate ministry. So focus on evangelism and discipleship. And so that was in the early 90s, 91. And, it's interesting, Nate, because in the mid 2000s, we just started seeing more and more of our male student leaders being disqualified from leadership in the ministry because of a porn addiction.
Mm.
So much so that in '07, as a ministry, we identified pornography as the biggest obstacle to us fulfilling our mission of building spiritual leaders for Christ. And so when we just we saw this, happening, and the addictions were getting deeper and deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really when I took my deep dive into this topic, because I'll promise you, when I went into the ministry, I had no aspirations to become the porn guy. And my wife would tell you she had no aspirations to be married to the porn guy. But it was really birthed out of necessity of, hey, if we're truly going to build spiritual leaders, but our discipleship doesn't hit this issue, head on and give people, a real path to freedom, man, our discipleship has a huge gap in it. And so in '07, I started my deep dive into this, topic, and learning all I could. And, it was a 10-year journey of, I've been through over 20 different porn addiction recovery programs, went through the training of a certified sex addiction therapist, and just, learning all I could. And, through that process, really identifying, hey, what are the principles that are biblically based, scientifically informed, clinically sound, gospel centered, and effective. And man, we started using these with our staff and students. And Nate, what we found is, man, people weren't just finding freedom, but man, deep growth in their walk with Christ, and and man, their fellowship with others, and man, their character on so many different levels. And so in 2017, it started in 2015, but we launched it in 2017. We're like, hey, we need to put this in a more user-friendly format. So that's when we created the app and the website. And hey, we wanted to make it free for folks.
That's amazing. Like there's so many thoughts there. Let's start with maybe pornography use in the church, and then I want to transition that to like give us a picture of what that's like. What do you see in terms of in the church? But then you mentioned the leadership part, and I think that's the next big thing. Like, how is pornography affecting men's? Again, and I know it's women too, but my focus is on Christian men.
Yeah.
But how is it affecting men in leadership in general, and then men serving in the church on top of that?
Yeah. Well, the Barna Group told us a few years ago that 2 out of 3 Christian men in the church are watching pornography at least monthly or more. That was from 2016. We did a survey, the Freedom Fight, of over 1,350 college students. And these weren't just your typical college students, but these were college students who were growing in their faith. And so this is a group that said, man, their faith in Jesus Christ is very important. They're plugged into a campus ministry, so they're trying to grow in their faith. And almost half of the group we surveyed were leaders in their campus ministry. So these are our future Christian leaders.
Yep.
So of this group, 89% of these growing Christian men in college said they were struggling with porn at least occasionally in the last 12 months. 63% said they were watching it weekly or more.
Wow.
24% were watching it daily or multiple times a day. 51% of this group said they were addicted to porn. And as you mentioned, it's not just a guy's problem, but the growing Christian women, 1 in 4 are watching porn at least monthly or more, and 11% of them said they were addicted. Again, not your just typical college student, but students who are trying to grow in their faith, man, they're, half of this group were leaders.
Mm.
This is the future of the church. And so it's a significant in, breadth, but that it's only getting broader, but also depth. Each year the students show up to campus, man, the addictions are just a little bit deeper because, man, they're starting a little bit younger, and, man, the adolescent brain, the younger somebody starts, man, the deeper those hooks, get into it.
Mm. I was shocked in your book to read about some of those early ages. Since you mentioned that, I was shocked. What is the research showing in terms of age that kids are finding this now?
Yeah, and and I cite two different studies. So it's between 8 and 11 is the first exposure, and it's getting younger. And just because of the technology, piece. And what a lot of people don't realize, because a lot of people, particularly old timers, they're thinking in terms of, porn. Yeah, every generation kind of has to navigate it. But what they don't realize is the technology shift in 06 and 07 was unprecedented, going from dial up to high speed porn. And then that being delivered to the iPhone in 07 has now made, an unprecedented amount of pornography is flooding the adolescent brain. Man, just the amount of hardcore porn that is, man, hitting youngsters, because we know this just from addictions, that the adolescent brain is more susceptible to addictions, which is why we have laws in place to keep addictive substances away from the adolescent brain. And yet with pornography, one of the more addictive substances on the planet, man, it's just free reign. And so, man, we've got a generation of kids growing up with incredibly deep addictions. And most of the time, the parents have no idea.
That's powerful.
Well, and I know you asked a follow-up related to, the impact on leadership. And I would say this, the Apostle Paul says in 1 Timothy 1:5, he says, the goal of our instruction is love from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith.
That's wild.
Nate, what is somebody struggling with a secret porn struggle? How does that impact a pure heart, a good conscience, and a sincere faith? Paul's saying, man, this is the foundation of, man, my discipleship, to have a love for God, love for others, and it rests on those three. And so when those three aren't there, man, no wonder, the statistics show that, man, somebody's, struggling with porn, man, they're just being sidelined from service. I mean, you read the quote from the missionary coming back from the mission field. It's, man, when you lose that sincere faith and a good conscience, man, the enemy uses that just to, man, sideline, man, so many men from leadership, in their home. One of the studies I quote in the book, it was a 6-year study of 3,000 people in the impact of pornography. And one of the things it found is, man, if somebody's not watching porn, there was a 1 in 3 probability that they would serve in their congregation. Those are pretty good odds. If they started watching porn monthly, it dropped from 1 in 3 to 1 in 10 probability. So, man, they're a lot less likely. If they started watching porn weekly, it dropped to 1 in 20. Their chances of the probability they would serve in their church. And one of the things that this study also found was that, if a man is watching porn, he's much less likely to read about or discuss faith with his kids.
Wow.
And so, we're in a spiritual battle, and, man, the enemy is using this to sideline men from leading in their homes, from discipling their kids, from leading in the church. And the sad thing is most churches don't touch the topic with a 10-foot pole. And so that's one of the things, man, I appreciate about you, Nate, man, your willingness to to touch the issues that most don't want to talk about. And man, the enemy is exploiting that silence.
Do you think, Ted, it hits me as you're saying that there's a chapter that you have on pastors and porn, and obviously we're talking leadership and porn, the shame that comes with it when you feel like a phony is so intense. Can you talk about shame a little bit and its impact on these very, I guess, things in the church? And is that a part of why churches are not taking this on? Everybody knows it's a problem, right?
Yeah.
But you had mentioned, even you cite an expert who had said, I think like 10% of men or something who struggle with it don't seek meaningful help, right? It's
Yeah.
not like they don't talk about it,
Yeah.
but what's meaningful help, right? Like maybe talk about
Yeah.
some of that.
Yeah. That only 10% will seek meaningful help, meaning 90%, man, are struggling, but man, they're not seeking help. And well, as an example, you know, I was in a church service a few years back, and the pastor gave a great message about immorality. The Greek word is porneia, where we get our word pornography. And he was like, "Hey, if this is something you struggle with, we have a booth in the back where you can sign up for groups." How many people do you think went to the booth in the back?
Raise your hand if you got this problem. Tell your wife what's going on. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's a real issue that makes it difficult to, because even if it was, hey, we have a group on Wednesday nights, come and get help. Unless you're in crisis or your wife is giving you an ultimatum, you're not going to the group because you don't know who else is going to be there. And so therefore you don't know who else you're going to be disclosing, man, this sin to, that, man, you've done everything you can to hide it. And so it's a significant issue. I quote, two studies in the book that, put the percentage of pastors who are struggling with porn to one degree or another above 50%.
Yeah.
And so it's, man, if this is something that the pastor's struggling with, this is not going to be something he's going to, be effectively, addressing in the congregation. But even for those who do want to address it, man, the shame piece is difficult to navigate because, as an example, that pastor at the church, he could have concluded that, well, man, we gave people opportunity and, man, not very many people come. So I guess it's really not a problem in our church, and so they can make those wrong conclusions. And so it's just, one of those, things that can be difficult to navigate. And it's why it's so important for us to change the conversation and move pornography and equipping people in it from a recovery issue and make it a discipleship issue. Because you see, the recovery issue is, hey, if you've got a problem, man, go to the booth in the back, versus a discipleship issue that, hey, this is such a massive issue. We all need to be equipped to understand it so we can be more effective at helping others find freedom. And when, the church is willing to have that kind of focus in discipleship, man, everybody feels the freedom that, well, hey, man, I want to, hey, I've got kids, or, hey, I'm trying to disciple somebody in the next generation, and I want to get equipped.
Yeah.
And so that's why, it's critical to, to shift that conversation and make it a discipleship issue, because, as we look in the scripture for the Apostle Paul, that's what it was when, he was, equipping these churches, man, he was regularly talking about sexual immorality, porneia, and man, it was part of his discipleship. It should be part of our discipleship as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have an app that's a private app and a community of men that are part of Getting the Fight ministry. And we have something we call the Fight Club within that. And a big reason for me doing that is because I think, to your point, like when you go like, hey, sign up after this great conversation about porneia, and you're like, it's a problem, isn't it? And everybody shakes their head and like nobody goes to the booth. Not only that, but even many churches who go like, we really need to connect people to life groups and small groups or whatever. That's true. But you know what? It doesn't go far enough, because even in that setting, it's not always appropriate. It's rarely appropriate that you would have a trusted environment for men and women together to be able to say, hey, here's what's really going on. So my
Yeah.
question is always like, where do men go? Right. And so we've created something like that to hopefully help. Maybe pastors from all over the country could go like, there's a place that doesn't have to be in my place, but I have to go somewhere. Where can a pastor
Yeah.
go? Where can a man go where he can be private and yet honest and find accountability, not just to say like, hey man, hang in there, but like meaningful accountability. I think to me, it's like, that's the piece that's missing, right? True
Yeah.
accountability. What does accountability look like when it works? Like, what are men doing that's not working that they think is accountability? And what does real accountability maybe look like?
Yeah. No, and I think that's a great question because a lot of people are like, well, hey, I'm in an accountability group. And, it's been my experience that most accountability groups, are, more like, partial confession groups that, hey, hey, I didn't really have a great week this week. Yeah, me neither. Hey, it was better than last week. Okay, man, good luck. Keep
Exactly.
up the fight. It's like, well, hey, man, I'm in an accountability group every week, and so everybody can feel good about it. But the most effective is, man, there's a pathway to freedom,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's one of the reasons we started the Freedom Fight, which again, it's free. But it's a program that, man, it walks through the 6 roots of a porn addiction and addressing it from a biblical, a neurological, vantage point. Because, man, helping people deal with the roots
Mm-hmm.
versus, well, hey, man, I messed up this week. Okay, well, hey, hey, try to do better, man. That's step one in a long journey of growth. And one of the things that we talk about is, hey, a person doesn't just quit a porn habit or addiction, but, man, the pathway that, Paul gives us, particularly in Ephesians 4, is, man, they must outgrow it
Mm-hmm.
by growing and developing in certain areas of their life, to outgrow a porn addiction. And so, man, if the accountability doesn't have that growth aspect, that commitment to change component,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of a Freedom Fight group, man, everybody shares a commitment to change this week. Hey, this is what I'm going to do specifically, and then, man, just the connectedness during the week, because it's not, hey, and that's one of the reasons we created our app and website is, we have an I'm triggered button
Mm-hmm.
that, man, you hit it, boom, it automatically goes out to the guys that are in your accountability. So
That's great.
instead of moving into isolation, man, you can break isolate. Hey guys, man, I'm triggered. Hey man, praying for you. And, but we have, some different things like that, a daily check-in. Cause, man, it's a battle, and it's not an easy addiction to break
Mm-hmm.
because of the access.
Yep.
So if you're in a traditional accountability group, man, that's, barely even scratching the surface of all that needs to be dealt with, man, to truly walk in freedom and experience that life-changing discipleship.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the show so far. And if you are, please do me a big favor and simply get engaged in a simple way. For you, that might be clicking the like button or maybe subscribing to the show. For others, it may be commenting on a show that really stands out to them, or maybe it's just copying the URL and texting it to a friend, or pasting that into your social media, or sharing it via text, whatever it is. All of those things make a huge difference for us, and it helps us to reach more Christian men who are trying to live bigger and better lives. So, number one, thank you for being a listener, and thank you for being a part of this community and part of this show. We appreciate it more than you know, and we appreciate you getting engaged and helping us out. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. It makes me think of so many things, I guess, but like I think of this verse, 1 Peter 2:11, that talks about how it wages war, keep away from worldly desires that wage war. And I just think of that war against the soul of a man who is going like, man, I joined the group and it's just not working. I go back again to that quote. It so encapsulates Like, I thought I was
Yeah.
doing all the right things. And in fact, to your point, like even about the college students, these are men who love God. They hate what they're doing and they're not finding freedom. And they're in that shame and that guilt and that, like, I don't know what else to do is so deep, right? And it really, it's going to take something new. And it made me think this earlier, Ted, like how important is desperation to freedom, right?
Yeah, man, it's hugely important because, man, because of the shame factor. Oh man, that is such a powerful, in the study we did with those 1,350 college students that are, growing Christian college students, 90+% of them said they experienced self-hatred
Yes.
after watching porn.
Yes.
And man, that's shame. That's what shame is, man. It's a self-loathing. Man, I'm worthless. And so, man, one of the saddest things, Nate, is, man, how many followers of Christ, instead of living out of their identity in Christ as a child of the King, they're living out of a shame identity and a worthlessness,
Mm-hmm.
a self-loathing. And dude, it's, spiritual warfare, man, at a whole new level that
Yes.
most people don't recognize. It's like, man, we've got these believers that should be, man, living confidently, man, empowered by the Holy Spirit as a child of the King. And man, they're just,
Defeated.
you know, defeated
Yeah.
and, man, self-loathing. And so, yeah, just that component. Remind me again of what your question was.
Yeah, sorry. Just I know it's like it's waging war against our soul, and it just makes me think again and just like how is it waging this war against a man's soul? I guess is kind of where I'm wondering there with that verse. Like what are the impacts there? As men are just feeling
Yeah.
so defeated. Like what are some of the waging war against the soul issues that are going on here?
Well, and I think, and I mentioned the self-loathing, but the and so part of this, you have this, again, going back to that first Timothy passage, man, the goal of our instruction is love from a pure heart, a good conscience, a sincere faith. The man, when a person is living this cognitive dissonance, man, there's a difference between what I say I believe
Mm-hmm.
and how I'm living, and you do that long enough, man, all of a sudden you have to start building some denial structures in your life,
Yep.
lying to yourself,
Yep.
lying to others, minimizing, rationalizing, denying. Man, that becomes a survival mechanism for a lot of guys because it's like, well, man, hey, it's not that bad, or well, man, everybody struggles with this, and hey, it's just once in a while. Well, hey, I mean, I've had guys tell me that they're actually doing their wife a favor by looking at porn and masturbating because, man, she's really busy with the kids, and it's like, dude, you create this whole denial structure
Yeah.
because to live with yourself,
Yeah.
because, man, how do I keep doing this?
Yep.
And so when you created this denial structure for years,
Yep.
I mean, and I've talked to a number of men, it's like, they can listen to a talk on porn, and it's like, well, yeah, man, I bet this guy needs it, and they've insulated themselves so much, man. The spiritual warfare, is pretty insane, and just, man, how at what a deep denial level men have learned to live in order to live with themselves,
Yeah.
and man, their Christian faith.
Yeah. 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 Devastating stuff. What happens in real life, for a married man, right? How is pornography affecting real life sex and intimacy with his wife?
Yeah, man, on a number of levels, and and I write about some of that in the book, but just um, it trains a person's brain when they're watching pornography to want new and different.
Mm-hmm.
And so if a person starts watching porn at 12 or 13, And and they've actually done studies, man. When a person watches the same porn clip and they start growing bored, man, the dopamine levels start dropping, and they go to a new clip, and man, it's a new burst, and typically it gets a maybe a little more extreme or a little more, and man, that's the pattern. And so you think, man, a kid from 12 or 13, man, that's what he's trained his brain on, and then boom, you get married, and man, it's not new and different.
Right.
And man, what God created to be, man, a deepening intimacy and a deepening enjoyment of sex over time. A person has trained their brain, they can't enjoy sex like that.
Yeah.
And so it's not a surprise that porn users have a less satisfying sex life than non-users. And then you bring in, man, the whole porn induced erectile dysfunction,
Hmm.
which, man, has exploded. I quoted a Time magazine article that in 1992, before the internet, only 5% of men under 40 struggled with ED. By 2014, it had exploded to 33%.
Mm.
So think about that.
Yeah.
33%, 1 in 3 men under 40 struggle with ED, and the vast majority it's porn induced ED because they've trained their brain on what arouses them, and it's a screen and self sex.
Yep.
And man, that's a completely different experience than healthy marital sex.
That's right.
That's why a guy could regularly have sex with his wife, and dude, later that night, man, he's craving, man, porn and masturbation because he's cultivated,
Yep.
man, this appetite. And so it's a different brain pathway. So, and man, that's one of the huge lies that young guys believe
Hmm.
is, man, well, hey, I'm just kind of, using porn for now, but man, once I get married,
Right.
man, then I'm going to
Right.
stop because once I'm having sex regularly,
Yeah.
man, that's going to fix it all.
Yeah.
Huge lie. And man, the number of couples in their 20s, man, that are struggling mightily,
Mm.
even ending in divorce because of this issue,
Mm.
man, it's exploding. And unfortunately, man, it's only going to continue.
Yeah.
And so it's a, man, it's a killer, and man, I know a number of guys because they've trained themselves, but while they're having sex with their wife, they can't climax unless they think of this
Yeah.
porn clip.
Yeah.
And so maybe they're with their wife, but they're really with this other woman.
Yeah. That's
And it's
right.
like, dude, talk about, man, destroying intimacy.
Yep.
It's like, man, that's, I think of John 10:10.
Yep.
The thief comes only to kill, steal, and destroy. But I came that you may have life and have it abundantly. And I believe, for the married man, that includes, man, the enjoyment of sex the way God intended.
Yep.
And but porn, the enemy promises sexual satisfaction through porn, and yet it actually delivers the opposite: kills, steals, and destroys.
Isn't that amazing? The devil is so good at going like enticing you to sin and then totally shaming you for doing it. Like, come on, this is gonna be great.
Oh
Come on, come on,
yeah,
come on, this is gonna be so great. And you do
yeah,
it, you'd be like, how could you? How could you do that? Right?
yeah,
He's so good at lifting it up and then just like beating you over the face with it and just pours on, like, how could you do the thing I told you to do? He's so good at
yeah,
that.
yeah.
It's powerful.
Well, and I think that relates to what you were, mentioning before, the denial and guys living in silence
Yes.
is because one of the lies that comes right after a person does that, dude, if these people really knew what you're doing,
Mm.
dude, they would completely reject you. And so people are like, dude, I can't, man, I'm not going to share this with anybody.
Yeah, that's right.
But man, the first step towards freedom is, man, bringing it into the light and confession. And so,
How does that work, Ted, when it comes to being married and sharing it with your wife? What wisdom do you give? Should a wife be an accountability partner for a man? Do they go and talk to it? Is that part of the freedom, or do you find it is different? That, like, what are your thoughts with that?
yeah, well, and that is it has a complicated answer because it's a complicated question, but I'll give a few principles. We have a whole married men's section module in our program, man, to help a guy understand that. But it's important, it's important that the man has a full disclosure with his wife, but the timing of that disclosure is also incredibly important because we recommend, along with, many others that we've learned from, is ideally, man, the man has 6 months of sobriety, walking in freedom before he has the disclosure. Because when a man discloses to his wife, and he's not walking in freedom, one, he's probably not, it's usually not a full disclosure. And so more continues to leak out, which is very traumatic for the wife. Man, she gets, completely, sideswiped, but then, well, okay, I know everything. And then, well, 2 weeks later, I find out I didn't know everything. And then, man, but that's called a staggered disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the most traumatic things for a wife when she's, man, trying to, learn to, man, trust this man who is my protector. And then, man, now my world's just been turned upside down. And it's that traumatic, disclosure that's caused many wives to have PTSD.
Yeah.
But then if the man hasn't grown in his sobriety, then, man, now he's relapsing again. And, man, now his wife, and he's taking his wife on that journey, which again just adds to the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we talk about is, man, establishing, some sobriety so that you can be completely honest in your disclosure. And again, we talk about this in the Married Men's module about how to do that. We have some resources, and because, when you do it right, man, it builds some protection for your wife. It helps you start rebuilding trust. But when it's done right, man, the marriages, it's been encouraging just to see, on the backside, man, it could be deeper, more fulfilling marriages than they've ever had. But, man, it's a process not to be entered into lightly, for sure.
Yeah, that's great wisdom. That's great wisdom on that. I love that. What like kind of walk us through, like if somebody goes to your website or they want to, they're at their first steps, right? Like, oh man, I've got to do this. Like, where do I go? Like, right, what are the first steps, and what does your process look like that guys could expect when they get there?
Yeah. So again, we have, multiple programs on our website. So our main program that we created is 6 months, and it's something you go through with an accountability partner. So a person could go right now, man, sign up and, man, start the program. And, there's a getting started video, and there's a study guide that goes with it, that with every lesson, the video, it's a video-based program,
Okay.
5 to 8 minutes each of videos that unpack principles of recovery. And then there's a short Bible study that goes with each lesson.
Cool.
But we make it very application oriented. So it makes it clear, hey, what do you need to be applying and doing each week? One of the things is checking in and having, taking a couple minutes each day, filling out your check-in, sending it to your accountability. But, for some guys, man, they're new to this. Hey, the 6 month program is like, man, okay, that seems like this big commitment. And so we've encouraged people, hey, we have a 30-day challenge. Again, it's a free program on our website that you can go through, and, man, it's 10 minutes each day. Content is sent, to your inbox. Sometimes a short video, sometimes just a passage of scripture and then there's some reflection questions, but it's specifically talking about this issue. And, man, it's super easy, for you, if you're, if you're in a men's group, accountability group, it's like, hey, let's do this for the next 30 days. You can just text guys the link. They can sign up, and, man, they can start. And, I know guys if it's like, well, hey, let's get together for the next 5 weeks and man, let's just discuss, man, each of the days, or even on a text thread. It's just like, hey, let's just share one thing we got from the lesson today.
That's great.
But that 30-day challenge has really been important, Nate, because it de-shames the topic.
Mhm.
It begins to man walk through some of the brain science, man, behind a porn addiction that also, I think helps people, man, the shame lift in the sense of, well, man, no wonder I get stuck.
Mhm.
And even though I want to not do this, why I'm doing it. And it adds a whole new dimension, to Romans 12:2, that transformation happens by renewing the mind.
That's right.
And so, man, it helps guys, man, begin to process. Again, man, de-shames it, gives guys hope that, man, hey, freedom is actually possible, because that's one of the huge lies of the enemy, that
Yes.
because guys many times on their own effort, man, have tried to stop
Mhm.
or been in an accountability group and they can't. It's like, well, man, I guess I'm just going to always be stuck.
That's right.
And 86% of the men who've gone through our 6-month program, and have been committed to the 3 core habits, have found freedom.
Mm.
Which, when you think of an addiction recovery program, those are phenomenal stats. We had a guy just recently. He's in his 70s, or he is 70, but he's been addicted for 50
Wow.
years.
Wow.
But and he was like, "Man, I never thought freedom was possible."
Mhm.
Well, he found freedom. Now he's leading a group of 6 men, through the program.
So cool.
And so there's, tons of examples of that has been really, really encouraging. That so that those would be the things I would say to help guys get started. Man, that 30-day challenge could be a good first step,
Yeah.
for a group of guys to go. And, there's been a lot of men that have taken their teenage son through
Okay.
that they know they're struggling. Man, it's a great thing to do with them, because reality is, we got students coming to, campus with incredible, depth of
Yep.
addiction, and the parents almost always have no
Yeah.
idea that it's even happening.
Let's just kind of build off of that. I've got so many other questions too, and I know we're running out of time, so we'll make sure we stay on course here. But the parents listening to this are going, okay, where do I go? Like, how do you broach this topic? Obviously, it's age appropriate and some of that, but when you've got kids, I've got 4 daughters, which makes a guy typically go like, okay, well, the problem, they're not going to have a problem. You read the book and listen to you, and you're like, yes, they do. Right. So it doesn't matter if you've got 4 girls like I do, or you got boys, and it doesn't matter how old they are. My youngest is 9, and it fits right into
Huh.
that space.
Yeah.
So talk to the dads for a minute. Like, how do we best help lead our homes with this?
Yeah. And I think, man, just being willing to talk about it. I was on a radio program, a little while back, and a mom called in sharing about how she discovered her 10-year-old daughter was addicted to porn and had been for almost a year.
Mm.
And but because it's so easy, and the thing I tried to help the mom understand, and I think this is important for your audience, is, man, a sex addiction or a porn addiction isn't mostly about sex, but it's about how a person has learned to cope and medicate with the pains and discomforts of life.
Mm.
And so this 10-year-old girl, man, she was experiencing a euphoria that she had never experienced before.
Mm.
And it became her happy
Mm.
place. Man, when she was down or stressed or anxious or bored, man, that was the place she went. And when a person does, and addiction experts tell us, when a person starts using their addictive substance to medicate, man, that's when an addiction goes deep.
Mm.
And and that's what it is for most kids. It starts off as curiosity, and man, then they experience this euphoria, and then they keep going back, and then pretty soon it's like, man, the brain starts making that connection. Hey, when I'm down,
Mhm.
I know where we can go to feel a whole lot better.
Yep.
So the next time they're stressed, the brain actually releases dopamine to start the craving to go down that porn pathway.
Mm,
And so, man, it's really, really important for parents to understand that. But there's a couple of resources, that books for kids, that we mention on our
okay.
website. I'm blanking on the name right now, but yeah, it's really helpful. Good Pictures, Bad Pictures is the name of the book,
Okay.
but it's, man, from 3 to 6 and from 7 to 12. But making it a conversation, again, it's age appropriate,
Hmm.
and it talks about the whole porn piece. But it's so important to broach the subject that, hey, if you ever see a bad picture, hey, somebody naked, that they're showing the places that a bathing suit covers up, hey, come talk to me.
Mm,
Hey, let's talk about this. So you automatically de-shame it. And man, it's a topic that, hey, let's dialogue, because it's not if they see it, it's going to be
yep.
when. But because of the shame factor, they watch something, they think, "Oh, I can't. This is a secret, man. I can't share." And so that would be one piece of important advice, that, hey, you got to de-shame the topic. And that book, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, really does a great job of doing that and just getting the topic on the table. And hey, this is a topic we're going to talk about, man. This is something that's
Yep.
destructive. Somebody's going to show you a picture at
Yep.
school. Man, when they do, hey, come tell me about
Yeah.
it. And so that's just
I
so
love that.
important for
Yeah. I know
parents.
one of the things we challenge and encourage men in discipleship and leading their families is like just find time to once a week, once a month, take your kids out one on one. It doesn't always have to be crazy, but just it gives a potential place to have a conversation. Take them to McDonald's. I usually take my kids to McDonald's or get coffee or something, depending on their age. But it
Yeah.
just to create a way, not only just to connect and to love and to be, one on one, but it does give you the chance to say, hey, if you happen to whatever, right? You see this kind of stuff, I just want you to
Yeah.
know I'm open to this. Let's talk, or that kind of thing. So one more question for you, and then I want to make sure you can share anything else. Last things here. Uh, there's a lot of single men that I talk to, maybe that have been married even before, now are divorced or still single, and they will talk about like, is it wrong to masturbate? Not just them too. I'm sure it's married men too. But is it wrong to masturbate because they're saying like I'm doing that instead of going to porn, right? That
Yeah.
what are your thoughts with that in terms of like relieving that sexual tension that they're feeling? I'm sure you hear that a lot. What are your thoughts with that? And what are some of the negatives, or maybe it's an okay thing? How would you answer
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Well, and I would say a couple things, and I mentioned this in my book, and actually in the resource sections in the back, I kind of expand on it a little bit. And even with the secular organization that does the training for certified sex addiction therapist, uh, just on a neurobiological level, man, the masturbation is, man, that's the same porn
Hmm.
pathway. And the usually the last stronghold for a man is like, well, hey, once he's quit watching porn, it's fantasy and masturbation is the last stronghold, because it's like, well, it's really just all the porn in here
Yep.
that, man, you can relive. And so, man, it's a trap of the enemy. And I would say, a couple things. One, Colossians 3:5, it talks about, let us consider the members of our earthly body as dead to immorality, passion, evil desire, and greed. But just, and our body was made for arousal in the context of marriage. And that verse is telling us, man, hey, the members of our body should be dead to passion,
Mm,
man, outside of the context of marriage. And maybe when somebody's, masturbating, that's not the case. But, also just, from an addiction standpoint, and I would also, add this, marriage, sex was intended to be bonding between a man and a woman in marriage.
Hmm.
Oxytocin is released during climax, and that increases, man, the bonding that takes place. And so when a person is masturbating, it's self sex. It's this thing that was intended to bring in this bond between a man and a woman. And you know what it brings a bond between? Man, these
Hmm.
images in the mind and the sex
Yep.
act. And man, that becomes, man, this bonding that turns it inward that was meant to be outward. And man, it's costing men a lot more than they
Yeah.
think. And it's undermining, for the married guy or the single guy who wants to get married, it's undermining, man, that sexual union with the wife. So yeah, it's pretty
Yeah,
significant.
that's a great answer. And I know, again, maybe there's a quick answer to this because but I want to address it because I think a lot of guys go this route, especially if they've really been addicted to porn for a long time. They start to introduce it to their wife in terms of, let's do this together. Like maybe that'll solve the problem. And I'm sure you see that. I know you do. It's in the book too. But just talk really quickly about that Christian guy who thinks, oh, this is a good way of doing it is because now she knows and we're doing it together. What are your thoughts on
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge
that? Hmm.
lie that, man, always ends badly.
Right.
There's a lot of research that, hey, in the beginning, if a person used cocaine in their sex life, it's like they may experience a heightened experience. When a person first starts using porn, if they brought it in, hey, it may bring a heightened experience at
Right.
first. But man, the downward spiral and what because really you're bringing in lust after this other person into the marriage, and so man, it's undermining the whole thing. And so man, that's definitely a huge lie that again a number of studies, but one the 6,000 people or 3,000 people over a 6 year period that if either the husband or wife started watching porn, that couple was 2 to 3 times more likely to divorce in the next 2 years than the porn free
Mm.
couple, because again you're training your brain to want new and different, and man, you're bringing this lust for this other
Yep.
person into your marriage, and it goes badly. And so, yeah, just another lie of the enemy
So
on the
many
topic.
lies there. And again, guys, like if you're listening to this today, you've got to go to the book. In fact, we'll give links to the book, but also you've got to go to thefreedomfight.com as well. Sign up for that 30-day challenge, sign up for the 60. And I mean, if you're desperate, if you're one of these guys listening to this who's just like, you feel like that first quote, and there's so many quotes. Again, when you read the book, you're going to be like, yep, I feel that. I feel that. Like, this is the battle line. This is like front frontline battle for men. And if you're desperate and you're like, I feel like there's no hope, you got to get to thefreedomfight.com and check out some of the stuff that Ted's doing. Ted, is there anything else that you want to say, anything else that you want to promote or share that would encourage men here today?
Man, a couple things. One, I would say, man, as followers of Christ, one day we're all going to stand before Jesus Christ and give an account and be rewarded for how we ran the race. And man, I just want to encourage you, men, that in Hebrews 12:1 it says, lay aside the weight and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with endurance the race set before us. And man, this is a weight and a sin that is, man, keeping so many guys from running the race that God has for them. And so I just want to encourage guys, man, freedom is possible. God wants to get you back in the race. Even like this guy, man, 50 years of bondage, man, he's trying to finish
Right.
well and man, get back in the race. But this is a massive issue that the younger generation is going to be, future generations are going to continue to struggle with even at a deeper level. And so we need more men equipped that's going to be able to help this younger generation. God can use you to lead others. He wants to lead you to freedom first. But I just want to encourage you to have the vision, because the enemy wants you to think that, hey, God's done with
Mm.
you. Absolutely false. God wants to give you freedom so you can turn around and help lead the next generation to
Mm.
freedom. So I would just, encourage your audience with that, and man, taking that first step to confess. James tells us in 5:16, therefore confess your sins to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. Man, that's the first step of healing. And
Love it.
so, man, Nate, appreciate the time, and man, enjoyed the
Me
conversation.
too. Again, so grateful for you. So grateful that God's put you there. So I'm sorry for your wife that you have to be the porn guy. That you gotta. That's how this has to go. But man, we're so grateful for your voice. So we so desperately need it. I love what you just said, by the way. That aspirational idea that when you find freedom, God can use you. This very thing that's been used against you, this very thing that's like made you feel so down, can be the thing that God resurrects and changes. He's a master at it. God takes those broken men and
Absolutely.
does that. So like you can not only get freedom, but you can be a part of this solution. How amazing would that be to do that? And just what a great call for men to step up and to be brave and courageous. Our key verse is 1 Corinthians 16, 13, and 14, where it says, act like men. And that really bravery and
Yeah.
courage. And it takes bravery and courage, not only to come to somebody at first and say, I've got this problem, but it takes amazing bravery and courage. Like it takes a real man to say, I need help, and I get desperate enough to do it. And if
Yes.
that's you listening to this, I'm telling you, Ted's stuff is so great. So yeah, Ted, so thankful for what you're doing. Keep fighting that fight. And guys, if you're listening to this, just remember what he said. I mean, freedom's possible. Freedom is possible with Christ. All things are possible. And I love the conversation today. If you're somebody who is looking for a place to go, a place to belong, check out getinthefight.club, our website. We do one-on-one coaching, and really our community to me is the long-term solution, where men are all involved in just trying to fight this fight, not just pornography, but just, to Ted's point, being disciples of Christ. How do we become the men that God meant for us to be? There is a place, and it's not the only one. There's all kinds of groups like this. Find something. Find something. But join a community of men who are fighting, and become a disciple and run this race for those rewards. You will be so glad that you did. You can also reach me at nate@getinthefight.club if you just want to like share where you're at. If you've got issues, I read those. I'll share those. I'll read those emails and get back with you on that too. But keep fighting, and we'll chat with you soon. Ted, thanks again, and thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
Right.
Thanks for having me,
You
Nate.
bet. You guys. All right, guys. We'll see you soon in the next episode. Thanks so much. Hey guys, thanks so much for being here today and listening to the show. Please be sure to head over to the website at getinthefight.club. And before you go, if you haven't already, please subscribe, click the like button, and leave us a positive 5-star review. It makes a huge difference whenever you do. Have a great day. Go get in the fight.